I guess we got to go to an origin story because they're probably wondering why I'm talking to this incredibly always happy white man. So let's get into it. So you and I met under the craziest of circumstances in one of the midst of my many failures that I ended up turning into lemonade. I'll be polite, but I had just been told by HarperCollins that they didn't think I was able to write a book. And so I said, I'll take my non-writing skills and go elsewhere. Basically, long story short, and I found a little place called Post Hill, and I said, I'm not doing ghostwriters or anything like that, and if I can't do it, I can't do it, but, you know, the hell with them. And they said, we'd like to introduce you to a writing coach, Chris Epting, and I was like, sure, I'll try a writing coach, and it just kind of took off from there. Just Tyrus was a huge success. It's still in the bestsellers list. Well, you brought a lot out of me. You challenged me. You dealt with my insecurities, especially when the book was getting ready to come out. I believe I called you and said I didn't want to do it anymore. I didn't want that many people.
2 weeks before release date.
Yeah, I was like done.
I'll never forget that call, Tyrus. That call was still like we'd had such an amazing, I think, experience. Because for your viewers, and thank you for having me on, man. It's great to see you. You were very apprehensive about letting go in your story. You just hadn't done it before. I think you wanted to do it, but you didn't know how to really go about it. But you kind of got into the process and were very open. I think that's why your book exploded the way it did. But yeah, you called 2 weeks before and said, is there any way we can stop it? And I said, no, man, they're published. They're in warehouses. It's going to be okay. It's a normal feeling when you've done what you've done. It's a normal feeling to have that kind of anxiety. But to your credit, you went with it. You were open. You were honest. And again, people responded. So I will tell you, as somebody who's written a lot of memoirs with other people and coached, as I did with you, I learned a lot from you. I mean, you always take from your subject, and you taught me a lot about sort of the faith of process and the ability to really open oneself up and confront things that in some cases you had never confronted publicly before.
No. And then, a friendship formed out of it, maybe even a mentorship. And we worked on my second book, Enough Said, which was doing phenomenal as well. And this one, I was a little more confident, a little more open, and we took on some challenges. And the only issue I had was that people can't tell the difference between Just Tyrus and Enough Said, so my books compete against each other. Right now, they're 1 and 2.
The next cover is going to be in color.
Yeah, we're going with green. We're going green. I originally wanted this in green, but again, because of honestly your confidence in me and willing to challenge me, I now feel comfortable as an author, whereas before it wasn't something I couldn't do. But this interview is not about me. This interview is about you, because you are an author and you do have a new book coming out. Rumor has it I might be in it. Not sure. I heard some things. And take me through that process, because you got eyes on a hard copy here?
I can grab a copy right here. You're not only in it, it's called Where One Hears the Rain. Finding your voice title, by the way. Crafting your story. Pardon?
I love that name, by the way. You're finding your voice in the rain.
Thank you.
It's very you. For those people who don't know you, you are a very emotional man in terms of how you express yourself, and that's a powerful statement. Where does that name come from?
That title, it's a great question. When I was a young teen, I had the very unique and rare opportunity to mentor under one of the world's greatest fiction writers, in my opinion, named John Cheever, who was a neighbor of ours where I grew up in Westchester County, New York. And until he died in the early 80s, he helped me with my writing. He would allow me to come over. He would review my stories. And it was, looking back on it, would be akin to having like a Michael Jordan help you with your free throw, whatever. It was just, It was an incredible opportunity that I'm not sure I appreciated as a kid. But there's a quote from John Cheever that I always loved. And it says, "For me, a page of good prose is where one hears the rain. A page of good prose is when one hears the noise of battle. A page of good prose seems to me the most serious dialogue that well-informed and intelligent men and women carry on today in their endeavor to make sure that the fires of this planet burn peaceably." And so it's about descriptive writing. And as you and I have talked about a lot, That's what's the essence of this kind of first-person narrative writing, is to make people feel like they're with you. And I think when people read your stories, they feel like they're along for the ride. And what John Cheever encompassed in that line, where one hears the rain, for me, represented the kind of book I wanted to write.
Now, have you always wanted to be a writer? Was that from the time you were a kid, like that was your thing? You know, I had a million, as you know with me, I wanted to be, the only thing I didn't fulfill was the firefighter part. But, life's, I'm not done yet.
You
Who
got
knows?
time.
But
You
I
have
got time.
I think you'll do it, and you'll write a book about it. I wanted to initially play second base for the New York Mets. In about fifth grade, I had a teacher who called my parents, and I thought something was wrong. If teacher calls the house, usually something's wrong.
Yeah, in my house, that was my ass. Yeah.
We had a writing assignment in class, and she thought I did a good job, and she called my parents to say, you know what? You should help him focus on his writing. He really enjoyed this. He did a really good job. I was a very average student, but in that instance, I excelled. And that did it for me. When my parents told me that, I said, well, you know what? If Miss Rinaldi sees that in me, then I want to be a writer. That was it. I speak at a lot of schools today. I always tell kids, look for your Miss Rinaldi, that teacher that sees something in you that maybe nobody else does. And that was it for me. And so then my dad said, oh, well, John Cheever lives nearby. You have to write him a letter and ask for advice. And I did. He responded, and thus began that mentorship. Throughout this book, I include everything I learned from him, because he made me keep a journal starting back then. And I went back into my journals and I found all those lessons. They're in this book. There are stories in this book about people I've worked with, including you. You wrote a beautiful afterword in this book. Your name is right on the cover there underneath, John Oates, who wrote the foreword.
Appreciate that.
But I write stories about people I've worked with, including you, and what you and I went through personally, emotionally, to get to the point where you were ready to share, because I wanted this book to help people write their story by using examples such as yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I think about, one of the reasons why we do this today is you don't get many chances in life to thank people who have saved your life. In a lot of ways, you saved mine. And I thank you for that, because striving to be the best, you get a lot of pains along the way. And at one point, the pain was pretty strong. And I called you and I said, I don't think I can do this anymore. The pressure of trying to provide, to be successful, to maintain, to fight through people who just go at you for no reason other than the fact that you have the shine and they don't. It got to the point where the pressure of trying to be whatever it was I thought I needed to be, I was failing in my mind. And sometimes people see your success and they think, oh man, he's really doing it, but they don't see the other side of it. And that was the one thing that I felt comfortable enough in you, because I could talk to you about it without any judgment. And I think that also helped in my writing to be, when I am writing, it's remembering I'm just having a conversation with myself, and there's no reason to lie or bullshit myself. And you really brought that out of me, because every other book that I've ever read, everyone's always the macho man, everyone's always the badass, everyone's always the smartest guy in the room. And, people don't relate to that, because oftentimes we're not. Now, or most of the times we're not, I'm living proof of that, but you can't always improve and you can't get better. So I appreciate that. And I feel like that's kind of been your thing with your students, correct?
Well, listen, man, you're killing me here, because we did go through a lot. But what you're talking about is so important. There's a whole thing in the book about it, and it's vulnerability. It's not being scared to embrace vulnerability. Forget embrace it. Really immersing yourself in it and owning it. Because to your point, that's what makes you relatable. That's why people want to follow your journey. Whether you're writing for grandkids or for a massive audience like you do, anything in between, I wrote this book just to help people get to that point. And you were open to it. Whenever we work together like this, I almost feel like there's a lot of therapy involved in it, because for you to get to the heart of your story and what you want to share, we have to unravel all these different layers. And it's the same thing in this book. I encourage people to get into that mode, and you did it. And that's why we could have those phone calls in the middle of the night when you were scared about something or maybe second guessing something. And sometimes that stuff wound up in the book. Other times it didn't, but we had to go through it to get to the rest of the book, because it's all process. Well,
speaking of your process, when you decide to write a book, how does that happen? Is it just you start fidgeting on the notepad one day, or is it just like, hey, I thought you're watching TV, but hey, you know what? I want to talk about that.
It's a good question. I mean, for my books, I'm a nonfiction writer. Again, part of my life, I write memoirs and help people write memoirs. And those experiences can come in a myriad of ways. You kind of, fell from above thanks to Post Hill Press. Other times I'll be connected with people. For my nonfiction books, they're about history and travel and baseball and rock and roll, things I'm passionate about. I'll usually oftentimes it sounds crazy, but I'll be in a bookstore looking for a book that I really want to read. And if it doesn't exist, many times I've just gone off and written that book, so at least I can have one. And then if anybody else wants one, it's there. Right. But I try and find stories that haven't been told before, or if they have been told, come at them in a way that shares some new learning or some illumination that hasn't been dealt with. I wrote a book about Theodore Roosevelt and John Muir and a camping trip they took, a 3-day camping trip in 1903 that resulted in the birth of the national park system. And that, for me, people knew a little bit about that story, but not a lot. So I was able in that book to unpack an entire story. So it really depends, but I'm looking for stories that are untold, whether it's someone working with someone like you, whether it's working with John Oates or the Doobie Brothers or whomever, to try and find their truth that you can share that has not been shared before.
Writing books, at one point, has it become a lost art? Do you think, with all the digital and the quick fix of like social media and stuff, do you think reading books has become, I don't want to say passé, but not to the point where cursive writing is gone, but do you see a comeback of book reading, or do you see it to where books are kind of slowly but surely kind of fading away?
I mean, books, look, I like a good physical paper book, like a lot of people, but I understand that there's a dinosaur quality in today's day and age, and I get that, and that's okay. I think what saves it is the fact that storytelling is never going to go out of style. Storytelling really is our first art. When you think about drawings on caves tens of thousands of years ago, those were stories. And that, to me, is what's going to save books, whether they're in digital. Look, I love books in digital form. I like audiobooks. I like storytelling. I like my paperback, hardbacks. So I think there's always going to be a place for great storytelling, and technology will create platforms for great. As long as you've got a good story to tell, I think there'll be an audience for it. It's just a matter of putting it together in a way that's compelling, that's relatable, and that makes people feel like they're with you. So I don't really have a huge fear about it. I think there's always going to be a place for books on some level. Beyond just physical books, there are plenty of other storytelling. We're telling stories right now. I mean, this right here, your show, is a storytelling opportunity. What you do on shows like on Gutfeld, you're telling stories. Everyone is. So I think that's really the craft that we have to rally around, is to protect and celebrate storytelling.
You think it could be a book that brings this country back together? It used to be where you could have an opinion different from somebody else's, and you just were an individual with a different opinion. I mean, and now it's lethal in some instances.
It's a blood sport. I know. It's crazy. It's insane how a difference of opinion today can result in losses of reputation and employment. It's crazy. I mean, for somebody who writes, somebody who expresses, I know you get it, the idea of celebrating free expression, the basic foundational principle of this country, to see that come under attack the way it has from certain corners is it's beyond offensive. It's it's completely unacceptable to me. But I still think, though, that at the end of the day, to your point, a book may do it. I remember when the first Harry Potter books came out, that created this renaissance in youth reading. That was a really big deal. People forget how that brought young people back to going to the library, going to bookstores to look for a book that transported them to a space that gave them hope and faith and belief and fantasy and all these things. So to your point, I mean, maybe it's a book you and I can work on someday, because you have obviously a very beautiful voice of the people that resonates and is relatable. But I do think that books and stories, at the end of the day, they will hopefully create rallying points for us that let us put down our differences. That's really the problem today. The intolerance from some corners for a difference of opinion today, to me, is horrific and has caused a lot of pain and suffering that is absolutely unnecessary today.
Now, if you were to pick one of your books to be a movie, which one, whether you collaborate on one or you wrote one, which one would be the one that you would want a movie that would be your your masterpiece? Because you've written a lot. I mean, you've written a lot of books, and you've helped written a lot of books. I was trying to count them all to get ahead of myself, but it's up there. You are an accomplished author.
Listen, I appreciate that. And I'm not just saying this. If someone said today, what would be your picks for what has the most cinematic premise? I mentioned the Roosevelt Muir story. That to me is a documentary I think could be very powerful. But look, man, I've written about 15 or worked on 15 or 16 memoir co-writes, coaches. Your first book, Just Tyrus, to me is as vibrant and visual and intense and not just replete with conflict, but resolution at the end and redemption. Your story to me, especially as it's illustrated in your first book, is as redemptive and beautiful and powerful a story as I've worked on. I'm honestly not just saying that.
No, you don't. You're polite even when you disagree.
Listen, I've written more than 45 or so books. Nothing has gotten a reaction viscerally like your first book. And that to me speaks to the power of it and speaks to the fact that it would make an incredible dramatic presentation based on what you've been through, what you learned, but most importantly, what you're willing to be accountable for. Because you don't run away from your mistakes. That is what I loved most about you right out of the gate. We talked about some pretty rough things you did and went through, but not only did you not run from them, you stood next to them, you embraced them, you explained them, and you took accountability. I was very impressed with that. It doesn't always go like that.
No, I spent the first 30 years of my life running away from them. So life's a lot easier when you own shit, I'm telling you. As hard as it is. And I'm this roller coaster ride for me personally has been trying, I don't see friends hardly at all. Occasional message here and there. And I missed that. I missed the normal guy stuff that I used to be a part of, but that's you can't get anywhere without getting some scars and losing stuff. And I think you've helped me put that out there in a way that other people can read it. Even though their situation isn't the same, there is still similarities into that.
Well, that's the key. It doesn't have to be the same. And I've spoken to literally hundreds upon hundreds of writing students and workshops and things that I teach. After your first book came out, so many of them came to me and said, once they knew our relationship, working on the book, they said, you know what? Tyrus inspired me. My story couldn't be any different from his story, but that's not the point. The point is he confronted demons and he opened up about things he had never opened up about. And if you knew the number, and I'm sure there are thousands more that read your book that felt the same way, that were motivated by you because you did it. You confronted it, you came clean, and you owned things. And I used to watch it in class. I still do. You've been kind enough to pop into a class once in a while.
Yeah, your classes are cool.
Well, you don't get to hear people talk after if it's on a Zoom or something. Once you're gone, everybody is left thinking, you know what, this guy, if he can do that, we're all capable of doing it because he taught us that you have to do this. And when I wrote this book, really a lot of it was reflecting on students because you learn, look, you've coached football. You know what it's like. You're out there coaching, you're teaching, but you're learning about life through those players. And I always feel that when I have writing students, they think I'm giving all the teaching. I'm not. They're teaching me. When you watch people find their voice, when you watch them confront things, it's very powerful. And there are a lot, I illustrate a lot of that in the book about what it's like to watch people go through that process. And again, people say to me, I'm not a good writer. I've never written. That's not what it's about. It's sort of like being a singer. None of us are good singers when we start. But the more you do it, we may not wind up with a recording contract or whatever, but the more you do it, the better you get. Writing's the same way. And it all depends what your goals are. Some people want to be on the New York Times list like you were. Other people just want to leave something for their family. I wrote this book for anybody and everybody. It doesn't matter what your motivations are. If you want to be a better storyteller, if you want to learn some methods and processes to get to the heart of what your life has been. Look, we've all led different lives. We all have stories to tell. We're all our own historians. Why not share those on some level? That's what creates a living record. That's what our legacy piece is. That's what we're remembered for. You've done it with a couple of books. I know you've got a lot of books left in you, and I hope other people pick up on that energy when they watch someone like you that tells the truth, that isn't afraid to go there, that will help others as well. So this whole process for me, it's teaching, but trust me, it's more learning than it is teaching.
Yeah, I tell people everyone should write a book, not even for it to necessarily even be published in some cases, just to write to yourself, to get to know yourself. We get so caught up in what other people think and trying to be what, and that was something for a long time that I was trying to chase, this image of what a real man was without a blueprint. And I had set the bar so high that, you know, I didn't think I was ever going to get there. I just, you know, I felt like I was always behind the thing and always frustrated and mad and worried about, you know, instead of what was in front of me, what was down the road. I was always looking at that. And one of the things writing a book helped me realize is, like, everyone's plan is different. You know, you can't.
Absolutely. And I agree with you.
Yeah, you can't judge yourself by one guy, you know, like, oh, I want to be the next Lou Ferrigno. No, you've got to be the Tyrus you are, whether that is you're famous or not, or a good dad or whatever. But owning your own bullshit is the key. And I think that's the biggest thing about writing, at least for me, it was a way for me to just kind of clear my conscience and get through stuff and be able to look. Because Arn Anderson, who's probably spent more time with me in the ring than anyone else in terms of teaching me, he always talked about, you can make mistakes in life. You just can't make the same mistake twice. And I'm a firm believer in that. And, you know, because if you continue to do the same thing over and over and get the same result every time, but you're expecting a different result, you got some other issues going on there. Let me ask you this one. Okay, so all the people you helped work, don't mention names, but, like, has there ever been someone you're working with, you're like, man, this dude is just full of shit. Like, I can't believe I'm being a part of this bullshit. Have you ever had to, like, raise your hand and be like, bro, I don't think that's going to work? Have you ever had to deal with any? You don't have to mention any names.
Absolutely.
But what is it like for you when someone's just in it just to try to get their name on a book to make a buck?
I actually, I like it when there's a challenge like that, because it pushes me to be a better interpreter of their story. Again, it's for me, it's all learning. Whoever I work with, the bigger the challenge, the better I'm going to be afterwards. And there have been a couple that have been, one in particular that was extremely challenging, but the friction that came, it generated what I think is a really good book. It took us a while to get there, but we got there. And to your point about, have I ever gotten to a situation where I think maybe they shouldn't be doing a book or they have no story? I wouldn't really let it get to that point. I tend to vet people I work with pretty carefully before we get into it, just so I know what I'm getting involved with. That said, sometimes there are surprises along the way that even the best vetting can't reveal. But when you find yourself in that situation, for me, it becomes a learning process, and we'll get through it. It's all about, you know, it's what's the story? You know, look, there's books, I could write books about writing certain books. I wouldn't do that because we have certain confidentiality agreements and things like that. Right. But writing is hard. Telling your story is hard, and I tend to give people a lot of space for that. And I don't really judge too much, because you've been through it. I've watched you go through it, not once, but on 2 books. And in each book, I could tell where you were hitting certain things, where you were uncomfortable. The water got really deep underneath you, but you swam harder, and you're like, no, we're gonna get to it. We're gonna get to it.
Yeah, I think,
and I always feel.
I was gonna say, yeah, and especially in Enough Said, when we talked about. Well, there we go. My dyslexia is having fun with me. But the abortion chapter, and where I was talking about through a man's perspective, that was one that was like, do we go there? Do we not go there? You know, and we went there, and I was surprised with the results. Probably the 2 most talked about chapters is the sea turtles one, which, by the way, in my stand-up shows, a lot of fans bring me glass sea turtles, like, you know, little crystal sea turtles and stuff. Oh, so, you know, really? It just kind of hits you. Yeah, like I got like a small collection, and it's like sometimes just being real with stuff. I will tell
anybody that writes a book or puts a collection together, there are always a couple of areas in that book. I call them set pieces. They're a little bit bigger than the rest of the book. It's like any movie. They'll tell you a great movie's got like 3 unforgettable scenes, right? Books are like that as well. And for your book, Enough Said, Sea Turtles, that was the first story we talked about in getting that book together. And when you started, for those that haven't read it, I really encourage you. Because when you first started telling me, in my head, I thought, this is one of those pieces in the book. This is a centerpiece that people will rally around. And The other one, the abortion story, same thing. Those two stories are primary set pieces in the book. I love everything else in the book, but again, it's like every album's got a couple of cuts that are just, they're bigger, they're more anthemic.
Yeah.
And books are like that too. So yeah, those two stories you mentioned were emblematic, I think, of the book, and that's amazing that people bring you glass sea turtles. I'll
have to send you some pictures. Like it's pretty cool, you know. And so, when is the book? Is the book out now? Where can we get it? Number one,
came out very recently. It's available now. Post Hill did a wonderful job with it. I love seeing your name on the cover for the afterword, and my friend John Oates from Hall & Oates, of course, wrote the foreword. Two guys I had the supreme pleasure of working with on their stories. It's out and available wherever books are sold. I encourage people, or if you know somebody in your life or a friend or family, to tell your story. Like you said, it doesn't matter if it ever gets published. The art of doing it, the exercise of doing it is healthy. It's redemptive. It'll make you appreciate your life. None of us is getting any younger. And it's nice to go back. I remember with John Oates, when his book first, we opened it, Hall & Oates was on the road. We got a box into his hotel suite. We opened it up, and there it was. And I said, is it everything you felt we set out to create? And he goes, you know what? He goes, it is, and it's more. I never forgot what he said. He said, I love that we created this book. We hit our goal with it. He goes, but writing a book, what it forced me to do was go back and relive things I never would have thought about again.
Right.
He said, and that is so powerful to me. The things we forget, the things we lose touch with, the things we disconnect with. Writing a book forces you to go back through all those layers of your life and reconnect and bask a little bit in where you've been to learn about where you're going to go next. So to your point, I think this book, I wanted it to be as comprehensive as any book could be in terms of a starting point right through getting it published all the way through. And you can pick and choose whatever kind of path you want to take. But I think they're all in there. And I thank you, Tyrus, again, for illuminating my path as a writing coach and as a writer by illustrating honesty, vulnerability, redemption, and really descriptive storytelling. For that, you've helped me a lot.
I appreciate that. Now, looking at the future, because I think we're gonna get started on some stuff coming up here. When you start your process and you get ready to take on, take me through like what your initial interview process. Though people don't understand, like your classes they're done by Zoom, so literally anyone in the country could take them. Correct?
And for those, I do some in person in Newport. I've done a long series there in Huntington Beach, but I do a Zoom version. The first process, as I outline in the book, it's pretty basic. It's kind of a 30,000-foot level of asking people to get together in one sentence each, 10 or 15 moments in their life that they sort of measure time on either side of, the big things, the pivotal moments in life where some hinge where something happened. It could be a certain job, a relationship, a birth, a death, whatever. But I think if you start with those 10 or 15 single sentences about what affected you, those are the first stories to me that are always worth writing. And then I walk through, well, what is a story? What are the pieces of the story you have to look through? Again, being a better storyteller helps you just in life. I don't care what you're doing. The ability to tell a better story is going to help any job, any relationship, anything. That's all in the book. But that's the starting point for me, is that basic list of 10 or 15 moments that really have affected you so deeply that they're story worthy.
So if somebody wanted to take your class, how can they find it?
They can go to my website is chrisepting.com, and they can write me through there, and I have a schedule I can send them. The classes are ongoing. I do them a number of times a year. They're usually about 6 weeks or so. I've had people in there for years and years. I mean, it's funny when you become part of what essentially is a writer's group at that point. There is something so cathartic about it and so therapeutic, and the people become a really extended part of your emotional family. And I've watched it happen, and it's a great thing to witness. And so people can take part that way. I'm super easy to write off my website, and they can get a hold of me that way, and I'll give them all the information. Now, listen, but you've got to make an appearance then. Any class they take, you've got to pop in once in a while.
I don't mind popping in. I have a good time. I didn't really want to talk about this because Your team is mopping the floor with my Red Sox right now, your lovely Mets. But baseball is still, just like books, still part of the American pastime. How important is baseball to you? I mean, it's just, is there not enough good books? Here's a book idea, and I'll throw it at you. If we traveled to every ballpark in America for a book, and we wrote about the intricacies and the history of each ballpark and fans' experience, and you find like families who've been going for generations to baseball. I think I used to think baseball was the one thing that could bring people together. You know, you go out to the ball game, you enjoy it. You can't. It's one of those things where there's two sports that you have to see in person, and that's hockey and baseball. I can watch baseball all long day. I watch, the Mets are pitching like they invented baseball these last two games. It's blowing my mind. It's driving me crazy. But it is what it is. And I'd just like to say for the record that if Stanley covered home, you guys don't win the World Series. But that's not where I'm going. But how important to you in America during this time do we get back to basics like baseball or good? Because everyone, Field of Dreams, you build it, they will come. Is this a situation where you write a book about American baseball, people will come back to the table again?
Listen, man, when I was 11 years old, my first time at the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, I went in the gift store looking for a book that would travel around the country to visit like every historic baseball place, and it didn't exist. And I said to my father, when I grow up, I'm going to write that book. And in about the first edition of Roadside Baseball came out, I think in 2003. It's in its third edition now, where I did that. I went and found every little nook and cranny related to baseball, because baseball is, to your point, anybody can have a catch. You know what I mean? It doesn't require that much. Any two people can throw a ball back and forth, and that gets you into the game of baseball. And I do think that there's a lot of salvation in that game. I would love to, as a follow-up to my book, Roadside Baseball, you and I would love to hit the road with you and add a different dimension to it, talking to players, talking to fans about their most important baseball experiences growing up. First game, last game, all of that sort of thing. Because I know you get the game, and we should do that. We should totally road trip and hit minor league parks, little league games, T-ball games, major league games, halls of fame, final resting places, the whole deal, and deliver that experience to people. I think that would be a fun book.
And we have to have a chapter on the best food in each park. So we have to try each hot dog, chili dog, or whatever the local accoutrement is, it's the entire thing. It's not just peanuts anymore. I'm looking at super chili dogs and Philly cheesesteaks and giant obviously we're going to need a trainer with us for me, because I don't want to come back, 450 bills when it's over. But I just think that
Tyrus, let's do that. Let's commit right now to doing that. That would be, to me, because you know what, when you go to a baseball game, I don't care what your politics are. When you're watching the game, keeping score, whatever, all that stuff tends to kind of fade pretty far into the background. Baseball, to me, more than any other sport, is a great equalizer.
Well, and also
you can argue about teams,
but you will agree that we all hate the umpires. Doesn't matter if you're a libertarian, a Democrat, or Republican. If his strike zone's too wide, you're going to come together on that one. It's just like
sadly,
last night. To be fair, last night those Mets strikeouts were a little wide. I was like, at some point, like, what are we doing here, fellas? Like,
you know what? When umps, like, I hate to say it, but guys like Angel Hernandez became almost bigger than the game. I would usually support umps because it's a hard job. It really is. But certain umps today tend to make themselves part of the game. I'm sure you've seen.
Ooh, that'd be a good book. The Villain Behind the Plate. See, this is what happened.
The clip of Terry Collins arguing with Tom, I can't think of his name, a wonderful ump, when Collins is losing his mind and the ump forgets he's mic'd, and they released that audio a couple of years ago, and you hear a really smart ump letting Terry get everything off his chest, doesn't throw him out of the game, but he lets him have his say. I miss that aspect of the game, but you and I could talk to umpires. We should make that trip. I
got nothing to say to them. I have nothing to say to him. That's your exclusive, because here's the deal. I had the honor of interviewing Cal Ripken Jr. With his minor league club in Baltimore and in Maryland, and I went there, and I was like, hey, there was the talk of having robots, or artificial intelligence calling ball and strikes. And I was like, human error is part of the game. And I thought for sure that arguably the greatest to ever put a pair of cleats on and a glove in his hand, Cal Ripken, I expected him to say, oh, no, that's the thing. No, he was like, we need that. He would be fine with a robot calling balls and strikes, because it's just going to be if it's in that box or not in that box, because his point was, and well taken, changed my perspective on the whole thing, was that too much power sometimes can fall in the hands of umpires, where they decided they want to. They don't like a guy, or a guy has a.
They show a guy up, and when they start showing guys up, it's ridiculous. And again, the game has also changed a lot, and guys obviously are throwing harder, they're running harder. It's hard for the human eye to pick up some of those plays at first, no matter how good you are. The game's changing. Guys are getting faster and stronger and all that. So it's tough. I see the argument. I think it's a valid argument.
That's at least two chapters.
But let's do that trip. Let's do that trip and write a book about it and tell some great stories and gather stories. I think we should do that. I think it's a great idea that was hatched right here on this episode.
Last question about baseball. Are you okay with the new changes? Speeding the pitch count, the pitch clock, the guy on second in the 10th. Who are we speeding these games up for? Because as diehard fan, I hate what it does to the ERAs of the pitchers in the 10th. But who wants to pitch with a guy on second? Everyone's tired. I feel like that the pitching clock, I don't really have too much of a problem with. I think that's interesting.
That's the one I'm okay with. I'm okay with. Because there is a little bit of dead time there. The rest of it, no. I thought banning the shift was wrong. I hate the shift, but I wanted to see more guys bunt. I think had that happen, let the game naturally attack the shift by having a team that just lays down drag.
Right, you have to get back to hitting. You can't hit home. Everyone's trying to hit a home run. If the Yankees ever learn how to get a base hit, they might actually do something in the playoffs.
But if you bunted through 3 times in a row, that shift would go away. Crowds would not tolerate that. So I think they're over legislating it terribly. The one that really bothered me, I have to tell you, was giving a guy a pass instead of throwing 4 balls on an intentional walk. Yeah. I remember talking to Chuck Finley on a radio show, and he goes, I hate that new rule. He said, because as pitchers, it's counterintuitive to throw bad pitches. He goes, it's hard to put a guy on intentionally. Because when we would have to do that, it got in our heads a little bit, and it wasn't as easy as people thought. That's part of the game. When a pitcher has to throw 4 deliberately lousy pitches, that works on them a little bit. It affects the game. To give a guy a pass now. So, no, I don't like these new rules. The game wasn't broken. If fewer people go because they're impatient with it, well, you know what? You lose them. But to us baseball purists, we love that. We like the flow and natural pacing of the game. So, no, I don't like those things for the most part.
All right. Well, we obviously have an outline laid out. So, post-hill, holler at your boy. It has been an absolute pleasure. Again, one more time, can I see the cover of the book so people know where to get it?
Oh, of course.
It's on Amazon. It's at Barnes & Nobles. It's wherever books are sold. It's a great book. I have my copy on Rush. I can't wait to read it. I'll probably knock it out in a day or two. It just has a very smooth way of communicating, and you are a great communicator. And especially after this interview, I think people will really understand hey, why do you stick with your writing coach? This is why. And for those people out there who are interested and who are thinking about writing a book, and don't do the ghostwriter thing, don't, learn your craft, and once you become a student of the game, if you work hard enough, eventually one day, your writing coach will be like, hey, I got nothing for you. You're good to go, man. Do you.
Tyrus, thank you. I want to thank you for the privilege of allowing me to help you tell your story. I love storytelling. I like encouraging people to tell their story, obviously, but yours will always be something utterly unique and wholly one of a kind from me. So thank you, my friend.
Well, thank you. Always a pleasure, man. And hey, where can people find you if they want to harass you or yell at you after this interview on Twitter or Instagram?
I'm on Facebook and Chris Epting. If you look that up, it pops up on most platforms. But my website's the best starting point, chrisepting.com. All the information is there to take a writing workshop, see these books and things, and, of course, on Amazon and all the other usual places to get books. It's available there, along with all the other books that we've talked about today.
Well, hey, man, always a pleasure. I'll probably still.
Thank you, Tyrus.
What's today? Thursday? Friday? Wednesday? Whenever.
Wednesday.
So I'm sure I'll talk to you before this weekend's even out, because now we've got to add another project to the list. So and I think I definitely think we hit a home run today. Always appreciate you, man. Until next time.
Thank you, brother.